With everything going on in the United States, you might be thinking about moving to Europe, but you shouldn't until you read these books. Today on the Life on Books podcast, we're going to be talking about our favorite books from Europe. My name is Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
Morning, Tony.
Hello. So we're going to go over, I guess, loosely our favorite books from Europe. Maybe just books that we really like.
Yeah, it was funny because I remember when I was making my list, I remembered however long ago it was when we did like our favorite Latin American novels.
Yep.
Or books. When we were doing that episode, I remembered while we were talking about it, or maybe it was just favorite books in translation. Kind of talking about how, like, if you asked me, just gun to my head, what is your general like vibe when you're looking for like books in translation? I would have been like, yeah, like probably like Eastern European stuff.
Yeah.
And then most of the books I picked for that episode, just works in translation, were all Latin American or translated from Spanish or Portuguese or something like that.
Yeah.
So when I made this list, it was a lot of, here's some books translated from a European language that I've read.
Yeah, which is fine.
But I mean, I liked all of them. But I've also talked about a lot of them before. So
yeah. And for our Patreon members, the bonus episode today will be 3 books that we want to read from Europe. So if you're not a member of the Patreon, you can sign up. The link is in the description. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. Extra episodes. We have a Discord server with a great community. And all right. We're going to start with our weekly reading update. What have you been reading lately?
So yesterday, I finally finished 2666 by Roberto Bolano.
Fantastic.
I was a big fan of it. I really enjoyed it. I know I texted you the final part, because it's divided into 5 parts. Mm-hmm. The final one was amazing.
Nice.
It was just damn fine literature.
Nice.
And then, I guess to put it in a little bit of perspective, so, one of the things that gets talked about a lot with the novel, the first section is about these 3 literary critics, scholars, whatever, who are all like obsessed with this very obscure German author.
Sounds familiar.
And then kind of go on this quest to try and find him. Mm-hmm. And then the final part of the novel is all about him and his life and how he got started writing and things like that. And it ties a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of the narrative, but like parts of the narrative together.
Yeah.
It is kind of, has that characteristic of a lot of novels that I like, that there's not like a succinct end to a lot of things. Like, it's not really tied up into a nice, neat bow. It's a little bit open-ended. But I really enjoyed it. And then I reread Antwerp, also by Bolano, to see if having read more of his work would help me make more sense of that book.
And?
It did not.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of a weird little book. I mean, there's not really like any linear narrative running through it. It's kind of, I think it was Seth from Waste Melliness that described it this way. It's kind of like the literary equivalent of channel flipping. So,
yeah,
it's just short little chapters that some of them are there's a repeated kind of story going on through them, but it's mostly just kind of like random things going on.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's 80 pages, so it's not like it's a serious time commitment to invest in it and pick it up, and you could read it in an hour if you have time. So,
and Carpentaria,
I haven't touched that. I haven't touched that at all.
Nice.
So, yeah,
cool. All right. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. So I DNF'd Carpentaria.
Yeah,
like I just intentionally I'm not going back to that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I have felt about it. I got 4 or 5 chapters in or whatever we're gonna call them, and it has not been clicking with me.
Yeah, same. When we read Savage Detectives for the book club, that was a fairly polarizing book, and I feel like this even more so.
I'm sure.
It seems like the group is split pretty 50-50. It's like people either loved it or literally DNF'd it. There's not a whole lot of, it was all right, I finished it, it was fine.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you strike out on your book club pick.
Yeah.
But it's all right. And I finished the Inspector Barlach Mysteries by Friedrich Durrenmatt, which was it's two novellas basically in one, and the second one was a ripper.
Awesome.
Yeah, the second one, like there was one chapter in there.
Well, I will steal that from you when you're done.
Yeah, there's a chapter in there that like might be the best chapter I've ever read in any book that's I've ever picked up. So, and then I started The Adventures and Misadventures of the Extraordinary and Admirable Joan Orpi, Conquistador and founder of New Catalonia, by Max Brisson and translated by Mara Fay Latham, and originally written in Catalan. It on the back here it says that it's somebody blurbed it and said it's like a combination of Don Quixote and Monty Python. I would say it's more like Don Quixote and South Park. It's like absurd.
Nice.
Very funny, but very lowbrow.
Awesome.
And it's very anachronistic throughout. So there's a lot of language to reflect the time period because it takes place in like the 1600s.
Yeah.
But there's also like things that are just like very modern terminologies to make it kind of funny. Well, really cool cover on this one too, I think.
Yeah, I have a copy.
You do?
Yes.
Cool.
When you messaged me about it, I'm assuming you're still enjoying it.
Yeah, no, I'm a little more than halfway through, and it's like it's not at all a serious book,
Right.
so it's very just like you pick it up, you read for 20-30 minutes, laugh a bunch, put it down.
Yeah.
Maybe don't really think about it a whole lot in between, but
Yeah.
still really entertaining, and like the gag of it like hasn't really worn off, even though I'm halfway through, and it's a 375-page book, so it's not short by any means.
Yeah. But yeah, when you messaged me about it, I put it in my. I think I had about 100 pages, give or take, left in 2666, and I put it in my short list of books to read after that, which is like 12 books. So.
Yeah. But it's also got very short chapters.
Oh, sweet.
And it's very like episodic. It's like this happened, the chapter ends. Now the next chapter starts, and it's like something new is happening.
Yeah.
So it's a bunch of like basically short stories, if you will.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and that's from our friends at Open Letter, and that's I think all I got for this week.
All right.
So
Cool.
we're going to go through our five of our favorite works in, well, not necessarily in translation, I suppose, if they were written in English, but from Europe.
Yeah.
Which is not a country. It's a continent, for those that may be confused about that. Apparently that's a thing now where some Americans are so poorly educated they think Europe is a country.
Oh, it's a continent.
It is a continent.
It's like ketchup and mustard.
All right. What do you got first?
My first is one that I have like pretty much all of these I've talked about on the show before. Is What Kingdom by Grabol. I don't 100% know. It is a Danish name. So please, if someone in the comments knows the proper pronunciation, please let me know.
So you have read something from Denmark previously.
Yes.
Because this month's book club is Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is from Naja Maria Aidt, and she is a Danish author.
Yeah.
So
I've read actually a couple of books from by Danish authors. I've read this, and then I've read two books by Olga Ravn. One of which, if I still had my copy, I probably would have brought it. It's The Employees, which was a great short little novel. But this one is it's translated by Martin Aitken. It is from Archipelago Books, and it is about a young woman in like a temporary psychiatric care. And it's really short chapters. It has, some humor throughout, but it's also just very cutting and thoughtful and heartfelt. I mean, you would imagine it being in a temporary psych unit, like it has some weight to it.
yeah,
So, but it's just a great little novel. So
that sounds similar to The Hospital by Ahmed Bouanani, who is a Moroccan author. It's about his stint in I don't know if it's like a hybrid between like a regular hospital and a psych ward, but he was like tripping on, I I don't know. He had some infection that was making him hallucinate.
Yeah.
but
But I mean, I don't know if you can, if the camera will pick it up. I mean, I flagged it a decent amount.
Yeah.
There's a handful of, it's just like, especially with like the short chapters, and some of them are only like a paragraph.
oh, nice.
So, every now and then, like there'll just be a line in there that it's like,
Yeah.
really cut in, really gets you. So,
And when was it originally published?
fairly recently.
Okay.
So it was originally published in Danish in 2021.
Oh, so it's very new.
Yeah. And then the English translation was 2024.
Nice.
So
Very cool. So my first pick is On the Edge of Reason by Miroslav Krleza, who is a Croatian author, considered kind of one of the greats. And I read this late last year, loved it. Although the whole book was very good, I thought the first 50 pages in particular were just like fantastic. And much like you had said, a short book with a lot of flags in it. And it's kind of about, and your boy Joshua Cohen, you're a fan of him, right? He's blurbed here and says masterly.
as an author,
Yeah,
I've liked a couple of his books. I've not heard great things about him as a person.
that's fine. We separate the art from the artist here on the Life on Books podcast.
I've read 2 of his books, one of which I really enjoyed. The other one, I could take it or leave it.
Was he the one that did the book about the Netenyahus?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Netenyahus is the title.
Oh, okay.
That book I loved. I thought that book was hilarious.
Yeah. And what was the other one?
Book of Numbers,
Oh, right.
which I enjoyed for about 3/4 of it. And then it was just kind of like, all right, Josh, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Let's wrap it up.
So On the Edge of Reason, it's about kind of like the rise of Nazism and fascism. So prescient.
To say the least.
Yeah. And this is from our friends over at this is NDP, New Directions, and I did not mention the translator, who is Zora DePolo. And she also translated Krleza's The Return of Philip Latinowitz. So, okay.
Very cool.
What do you got next?
The next, I've got, again, another one that I've talked about before. It is The Red Handler by Johan Harstad. This is from our friends at Open Letter. It is translated from Norwegian
Very nice.
by David M. Smith. And this one's really, it's very metafictional.
But is there any meatheadedness in that book?
Probably a little bit.
Okay.
So Johan Harstad is the author.
Yep.
The Red Handler is a character created by a fictitious author named Fraud something.
Probably not fraud. Would it be fraud?
It's Frode.
Frode?
Frode Brodigan. Again, this is a Norwegian name, so if someone wants to help me with the pronunciation on that,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Yeah, not me.
But Brandigan is a fictitious author who wrote
Gotcha.
The Red Handler, and the actual like Red Handler, it's their micro novels.
Oh,
so
wow.
they're each like, I don't know, 5 pages, and the chapters in them. I mean, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but like that's a chapter.
Wow, quite short.
Very short. Who's this like private eye detective character. And then those take up about 150 pages of the text. And then the latter half of it is so it's the Red Handler micronovels are heavily annotated. And the annotations, some of them are kind of just, random things. But then it also, in the annotations, they get into Brannigan's life, like talking about his like relationship with his father and things like that might have inspired character traits of this Red Handler. And again, that all those annotations are part of, the whole novel.
Yeah.
And it took me about, I want to say 6 of the micronovels to figure out the gimmick there.
Gotcha.
But it's very funny.
Whole thing sounds very meta.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like I said, this red handler is, like I said, he's a private detective. And it kind of flips the detective-ish genre on its head because he'll be, searching for this guy, a criminal or something like that. And he'll find him and not really have any like actual proof or evidence, it'd be all like circumstantial. And he'll confront the suspect and the guy would be like, basically like, yep, I did it. You caught me, So he tends to, like I said, all the micro novels are like 5 pages and he tends to, solve the crimes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of fun.
It's a quite handsome book as well.
Yeah, it's a really cool cover. You got the ashtray. They put a small little, it's an open letter crime book. I don't think the camera will pick it up, but that little emblem is cool.
Oh yeah. Chad, send me that one. Hook me up, bro. Nice. All right. The next book on my list is one that our audience is probably fairly familiar with. It's Heart of a Dog by Bulgakov. And this particular edition was translated by whom? Oh, geez. Yeah, I don't want to try to pronounce that. Sobashe Sertza? I don't even know.
Yeah, Sertzi? I don't know.
Who knows? I couldn't even tell you, like, what kind of name what country that name might be from.
Yeah.
So Bulgakov is obviously probably most famous for The Master and the Margarita, which you've read.
Yes, I've read that as well.
Yeah. Oh, did you like either of them?
Not particularly.
Okay, well, I love this. I thought it was hilarious. The premise is effectively a guy figures out a way to turn a dog into a person, hence the kind of cover art there. Andy's texting his mom.
I'm listening. Keep going.
Millennials. You're a millennial, right?
I think so.
All right.
I think I'm just on the. You are too.
Yeah, but I'm like the original, like the first wave. So we're closer to like Gen X.
You're a boomer.
Boomerism is a state of mind, Andy. It's not an age. We either die or live long enough to see ourselves become the boomers. There's probably like a lot that you'll miss in this book that's like political satire of the time.
Yeah.
1960s Soviet Union. But either way, still quite funny. The type of book where maybe like reading along with some type of analysis or companion is probably helpful, even though it's quite short and it's not a particularly difficult read.
Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of like very absurd, which is right up my alley.
Yeah.
So
I will say I did like that more than I liked Master and the Margarita.
Yeah.
The Master and Margarita, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
The Master and Margarita, right there on the cover. But that was one of the things I felt reading Master and the Margarita was like I was missing a lot of the subtext and context and just like, which that's a very satirical novel as well, and like I just didn't have enough of the context to like get what was satirical about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those books, both that and this book, and a lot of like Russian, like Dostoevsky and things like that. I think people are sometimes afraid to say or admit that they didn't really understand or enjoy it,
right?
Because they're such highly regarded novels that it's like sacrilegious in the literature community to say anything bad about Dostoevsky.
Right?
It's like an offensive opinion, but we don't give a shit here on the Life Published podcast. We have what is the saying? No sacred cows.
Yeah.
So. Anywho, what do you got next?
My next is Septology by Jan Foss.
We don't know how to say anybody's name on this show.
Yeah. And these were, let's see, where's the translator? Translated by Damien Searles. This is also Norwegian. Fosse just won the Nobel Prize 2023. This is from our friends at Transit Books. And this is kind of typically, his like people think of as like Fosse's kind of masterwork. It's technically 3 novels is one in one. The Other Name, I is Another, and A New Name. It's about a painter who lives in Norway and kind of like reminiscing on his life. And, you know, he meets these other characters that are kind of more or less like doppelgangers, kind of, excuse me, him kind of ruminating on different ways his life could have turned out through these doppelgangers. But there's like no punctuation or no real like full stop.
Oh, fun. My favorite kind of writing.
But it reads very smoothly. Like it doesn't feel like clunky and awkward.
Yeah. Is it a challenging read?
It can be at times, but it's not exactly like super dense prose. And there's a lot of like paragraph breaks and things like that. So it's not like a Krasnohorkai where it's just, you know, a 700-page single paragraph.
Yeah.
There's pauses and breaks and things like that, so you can kind of get the rhythm. But it kind of sort of has this like almost like hypnotic, haunting melody to it. I read this while I was quarantined with COVID the second time. And I like in like 2 or 3 days, I just couldn't put it down. I mean, I was, like I said, kind of quarantined in the library, so I didn't really have any other options. But it just, you know, it flows very well. It's very rhythmic. And like I said, it's not exactly like dense prose. So it's not, aside from the structure of it, it's not like a super challenging read. A lot of characters with similar names or the same name, which can add some complexity to it. But, you know, it's just is really fun. I shouldn't say fun, but very unique and interesting and compelling work.
Have you read anything else from him?
I've read The Shining, and then I think it's Morning and Evenings. Mornings and Evenings, something like that. And I liked A Shining. It was kind of hit or miss on the other one. As much as I liked A Shining, it did not have the same effect on me that Septology did. But this is such a great book. And I mean, obviously you can see it's a pretty big one. It's long. I mean, I think this particular edition is 667 pages.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, without like a full stop until page 667. So,
okay.
But like I said, it flows really well. It doesn't feel like awkward and run on.
Right. That's good. That's, I mean, a testament to the quality of the writing itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would struggle with a book like that regardless. So,
but like I said, with there being, you know, paragraph breaks and things like that, like I felt like there were times that if I was like, okay, I need to put the book down for 15 minutes or whatever, like I was able to stop and pick it back up and not feel like lost. Like I was, you know, interrupting the rhythm of it. So,
yeah, it's funny. We opened up a portion of the Discord server to, I guess, the public, if you want to put it that way. Basically, you don't have to be a member through the Patreon to access certain channels. And we did that for a couple reasons. One is, you know, there are people that, even though the club's $5 a month, that might not be doable for them. I think a lot of times too, because we talk about books from outside of the U.S., like we just have a large non-U.S. audience. And so like the conversion, maybe you're in a country where like $5 is like a lot of money.
right.
And I was like, well, you know, this whole thing's kind of about community first. So let's add like a free option. And then also, you know, obviously being part of like the free thing might interest people to actually like join the full on book club where there's a lot of other stuff going on. But with that said, you know, I made one Instagram post and effectively just like, we're opening this up enrollment for like 24 hours. And so we had this huge influx of new people. And, I would say my Instagram audience is pretty broad. So there's a lot of kind of like people that maybe read more pop fiction, and there's just a lot of different types of readers that follow me. And that kind of spawned in the Discord server some conversations, and one of those is like the audiobooks, do they count thing. And one thing that I kind of thought of when I was discussing this with somebody in the server that I never really like thought of before is, and again, just to clarify my position on audiobooks, if that's what you enjoy or if that's the only means you have to, experience books, then that's what you should do. Not my preference, but I really don't care what people are doing. But I do see them as different experiences. And one thing I was thinking about that I never thought about before with this is like, this is a great example of this book that you just talked about, where if there's no punctuation and there's no page breaks, like that was an intentional choice by the author that you really will not experience with the audiobook. Same thing with like a Joyce or maybe a McCarthy, where they're famously not using quotation marks, and or a book like House of Leaves. I don't know if there is an audiobook of that, but so much of the experience of that book, no matter whether you think that experience is good or bad, is the layout and design. And same thing with like The Tunnel by William Gass.
Yeah.
Part of the fun of that book is just the way he played with how the words are on the page. So again, one is not better than the other. They're just different experiences. And I wish that it would be more socially acceptable to publicly discuss those differences with people not getting so upset about it. Either way, because there's people that are like, they want to demand that you say it's exactly the same, otherwise it's ableist, or there's people that are like, audiobooks are cheating, whatever that even means.
Right.
This isn't a test, guys. There's no final exam. Stop counting books. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, my rant is over, and we're going to talk about A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I felt like I couldn't, not put this on here. I think like a big motivation for both of us for the show in general is to like help people discover new books. If you haven't heard of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, I don't know, do you even read? To at least, you're probably at least aware of it.
Right.
But just an enduring classic of literature. I don't read a lot of 19th century stuff, but of what I've read, this is a book I think about often. Of the Dickens that I've read, this is my favorite, although I haven't read a ton of them. I've read this, Great Expectations, A Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, and that might be it. But anywho, yeah, just a fun book because Dickens has a very unique style that he's famous for, which is, if you're in the mood for it, a good time. But also just kind of like a unique story. It's about the French Revolution, which is cool. Maybe grossly embellished some of the events or the levels of the violence, but it's like a book that I think kind of has a little bit for everybody, because in a way it's a love story, but it's also like a book with political intrigue. It's got some anti-hero elements to it. So I don't know. It's just kind of a cool story. So great. You should read it, Andy.
I should read any Dickens.
Start with that one.
Yeah.
See what you think.
Not a bad idea. Okay. My next pick, another one that I've talked about on the show a number of times. I probably could have picked a number of books from this author. There's some recency bias here, but it is probably one of my favorites I've read from him. This is Baron Venkheim's Homecoming by Laszlo Krasznahorkai.
AKA The Big Red Book.
The Big Red Book. This one, because he's got a few different translators. This was from Adelaide Molzet. She did his most recent English publication, Hurst 07769, whatever the hell the string of numbers at the end of that one was.
Yeah, which was a kind of the inspiration for the now controversial article about Brodernism, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we should probably do a whole episode about
We
that.
probably should. I should probably reread that article. I kind of skimmed it while I was at work. So.
Same. I didn't think it was that interesting.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. No offense to the author of the article, whose
Yeah.
name I don't even recall.
Yeah. The only thing I remember about that is he kind of like made fun of a bunch of books that like fall under that category of genre, or whatever you want to call it, of Broderism,
Yeah.
whatever the hell it was. And I was looking at it, I was like, I own so many of these.
Yes.
Like
It seemed like he was calling you out personally.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, this was a great novel. It does have his Krasnorkai's kind of signature run on, so to speak, very long sentences, very long paragraphs. There were plenty of breaks, so a new paragraph would start. And I felt a lot of times, I mean, some of the chapters are kind of long. Maybe not long, but let's see. Yeah, I mean, some of the chapters are like 80 to 70 pages-ish.
Wow.
But they all had, paragraph breaks. So,
Yeah.
And I never felt like, same thing as I said about Septology, like I never felt like any of them, like if I stopped at the beginning of a new paragraph, that like when I picked it back up, I was totally lost.
Yeah.
But, has his kind of signature apocalyptic air and dark humor, a little bit absurd.
Yeah.
So
That was going to be on my, I almost picked it for my books from Europe I want to read for the Patreon segment today, but spoiler alert, I did not.
Yeah.
So
I
had a feeling that you were going to bring that though.
Yeah. It is, I think I've talked about this before. He kind of considers 4 of his books, Satan Tango, Melancholy of Resistance, War and War, and this as kind of one uber novel, so to speak. I don't think, there's some thematic connections between the two. And, I think like the town from Melancholy of Resistance gets named here,
Okay, cool.
but you certainly don't have to like read them in order.
Right.
I think, if you have the ability to, I think it probably would improve the experience, but I don't think you'd like miss out on anything
Right.
if you just saw this one, or this was the only Krasnorkai you have and just wanted to start reading his work.
Yeah.
So, but I thought this was such a great novel. This is the longest of the 4. I believe it's actually the longest book he currently has out in English. I don't know if he's got anything longer yet to be translated, but it's about 560 pages.
Cool.
So, but it's an awesome book. It's like I said, it's dark, it's humorous, it's kind of tense and suspenseful.
Yeah.
And
Critiques capitalism. Is that
not so much.
okay. I thought the premise was this rich aristocrat runs out of dough, right?
Sort of. So the Baron Van Heim, he was living in Argentina, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a very archetypal character that appears in most of Krasnorkai's books. It's kind of like the holy fool. And he's just kind of a dope. And he's racking up gambling debts and things like that. And his family thinks he's gonna bring shame to the family name, so they send him back to Hungary, in kind of a destitute town. And the townspeople think that he's going to be the savior to all of their problems. And spoiler alert, he is not. So,
Okay.
I don't think it's a direct critique of capitalism. I think some of his books, especially like Satan Tango, is more of a kind of pokes fun at communist Hungary. This is a little bit more vague in terms of any sort of like economical critique.
Yeah.
At least that was my perspective. Someone else might have a different opinion. But
I think I saw that as like a blurb though, on the book.
Susan Sontag does refer to him as the Hungarian master of the apocalypse.
Okay, cool.
Which, I mean, the apocalypse is because of capitalism. So
Correct. Yeah.
you can do the math there, I guess.
Yeah. I have a little heartburn today. Capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay. So, my next pick is a thick boy.
Big boy.
The 40 Days of Musadog by Franz Werfel, who was a fine gent. This was written in the 1930s and originally translated into English by, I think, Jeffrey Dunlop, but it was heavily, heavily edited down in the initial English translation. And this edition translates the original text in full. And so also translated by James Rydell. So I'm actually, I should know this, but I don't know which one of these guys did the first one and then the other one
Filled in the blanks.
Filled in the blanks of this most recent edition from Godin. But yeah, originally written in German, and it's about the Armenian genocide. I think I talked about this on one or two episodes we did last year. I read it last year, made my top 10. I loved it. Very Tolstoy-esque in the sense that it's kind of like a grand epic. Although it doesn't span like generations of time, there is a huge cast of characters, a lot of intertwining narratives, offshoot narratives, very like grandiose sometimes in the writing style, but not necessarily super challenging to read. If you don't know anything about the Armenian genocide, you will definitely learn a lot. There are some liberties taken in the fiction aspect of it, but more or less everything in the book is pretty much based on something that actually did happen. It's just that it might have been resorted in timeline wise to make a more cohesive narrative, or like there's one battle in this book that I think didn't happen at Musadog. It happened elsewhere during the Armenian genocide, and he like
Placed it.
Yeah. So, fairly, I would say pretty close to the truth, and none of the liberties taken are really like a gross exaggeration. But just a book that I loved while I was reading it and still think about a lot. And definitely just a fun fact, I have just a regular YouTube video coming this week, or actually this will be out probably after it, but Hidden Gems of Literature. And I put that on the list because I saw this at Gibson's bookstore. You and I were there for a sale, and I obviously any thick book with a non-American sounding name catches my attention because
Absolutely.
we both like big books. We both like works in translation. And then when I saw it was about the Armenian genocide, which is something that I've read about before and kind of have an interest in, I was like, oh, this is going to be a home run. And when I always like to pull up on Goodreads just to get like a general sense of what people are saying about it. And, sometimes you can like click, like somebody says, oh, I hated this book. Go look at their profile, see what else they like or didn't like, and you can kind of be like, yeah, your opinion sucks.
Yeah.
And when I pulled it up at the time, it had been like rated, not reviewed, but rated like 400 times, which is nothing. So I was like, ooh, yeah. Slide in.
Absolutely.
Lock in. It was the stars aligned on that one. So, all right. We are down to our last picks here.
Yeah. Looks like we both have ones from the same publisher.
Fantastic.
I won't spoil that. Oh, I guess I will.
Kind of know getting around it.
Yeah. Another one that I've talked about a number of times on the show, Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu, translated by Sean Cotter, and this is from our friends at Deep Vellum. This is an awesome book. It is sort of along the lines of like an auto fiction.
Yeah.
But similar to what I was saying about septology, where the protagonist is kind of seeing different ways his life could have turned out.
Yeah.
This is Cartarescu kind of playing with how his life could have turned out differently. The kind of central narrative running through it is you have this Romanian school teacher who really falls in love with books and poetry and things like that, and attempts to write some poetry, and goes to a poetry workshop and where people can read their poems and things like that, and get critiqued by other people in the workshop. And he goes and reads this poem that he had written, and which is something that Carter Rescue did in real life, and in his actual life, like everyone there loved this poem, and it kind of put him on the path of being a respected writer. But in the novel, he reads this poem, and everyone there just like critiques it to hell. Nobody likes it. It's not even like constructive criticism. They're just like, "What are you doing?
Yeah,
go back to your day job," type thing. And then that's pretty much what he does, and kind of living his life and getting involved in certain movements in Bucharest. And I don't think he lives in Bucharest, does he? Yeah.
And this was this one of the books that was mentioned in that article? It's kind of like overhyped.
Probably.
I think
I feel like it probably was.
I think I also saw just generally like on Instagram, people were kind of saying like, "Oh, the hype, now that the hype's died down, like, maybe this book isn't as good as people say it is."
Yeah.
Which, I mean, whatever. It doesn't mean anything
right.
to
And
me,
I mean, I remember like I bought it right around when it was originally published in English, and there was a lot of hype around it. And I didn't get around to reading it for a while. The hype had started to die down by the time that I read it. And, maybe some of the hype was a little unmerited. But, you can call it a little overhyped, but I still thought it was a great book.
Yeah, I think that people struggle with the idea that like something could be overrated but still good.
Yeah.
Like overrated just means that it's rated higher than it really should be.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, if you say Solenoid's the best book of all time, maybe that's an overstatement, but that doesn't mean it's a bad book.
Right. Which is probably where I would rank it. Like maybe I don't even know if I would say overrated, but I think overhyped.
Yeah.
But I still thought it is a great novel. Carter Rescue is a very talented writer.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird and surreal book. So there were certainly elements of it that pertain to me. With the blurb on the back, if from Max Lawton, who translates a lot of work. I believe he's the one translating Schadenfreude, which is due out from Deep Vellum towards the end of this year.
Isn't that German?
German.
And he also translates a lot of Russian stuff, right?
He translated some of Sorokin's books,
right?
A handful of Sorokin's books.
Damn, Max Lawton, how many languages do you speak,
dude?
Doug?
He's crazy.
Max, can you come on the show?
Yeah, please, Max.
Let's get over here.
No, he's done a couple of podcasts. He's a cool guy. It'd be awesome if we could get him on the show.
Yeah. Do we have enough clout?
I don't know.
All right.
We'll see if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
But the blurb he wrote, if Hanke and Nosgard dropped acid together in a Bucharest exterminator's abandoned shop with only Kafka's Metamorphosis for company.
Wow. Okay.
So
lots of deep cut references there.
This is the sort of autofiction their combined brain might then produce.
Wow.
So
sign me up.
Yeah, it was a real trip of a book. And then, like I said, you can see I flagged a lot of stuff.
A lot.
So
yeah, that's cool.
It's a great book.
Speaking of poetry, completely tangential, but we have to, hit our benchmarks here. I watched this documentary yesterday on Netflix.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you've been started reading poetry.
I actually bought a book of poetry. Then I told myself I was going to read one poem a day. But I've had just an absurdly busy last month for no reason whatsoever. It's great. Lots of client work. Able to live my life.
Buy more books.
But I watched this documentary yesterday on Netflix called Gold and Greed or Greed and Gold. Mm-hmm. And it's about this dude, Forrest Fenn. Are you familiar with this story?
No.
Apparently this was like big national news, but I somehow missed it. So this dude, who was like a retired Air Force pilot, very decorated guy, and then he became like an art dealer, just had a very interesting life. Mm-hmm. He wrote a memoir, and I think self-published it, and kind of realized like, people self-publish books every day. Like no one's going to read this unless I give them a reason to.
Yeah.
So he buried some treasure in the Rocky Mountains, a box like about this, maybe 10 by 5 or something like that, full of gold.
Nice.
Estimated value between $1 and $5 million.
Nice.
And in his memoir, he put a poem, and he said the poem includes clues to where it's buried.
Nice.
And it became this national phenomenon, like people going nuts to find this.
Nice.
And like people who obviously maybe they're on hard times and they're thinking I can get this money, and then people who are very well off just want the adventure and just the fun of the puzzle. And like people ended up like dying searching for. Oh yeah, it was. Dude, the documentary is very well done. Definitely worth a watch. It's like 3 episodes. They're maybe a little over an hour each. But yeah, very well done, very entertaining, and just a crazy story.
That's wild.
Yeah, and the poem was not bad.
Nice.
So if you're, if you're one of the authors that messages me asking me to review your book, just some better advice: go bury a box of $1 million worth of gold somewhere and use that as your PR. You're gonna get more, than me plugging it on the show. So
yeah.
Okay, my last book is a book that I've talked about quite a bit, and it is "The Anarchist Who Shared My Name" by Pablo Martin Sanchez, translated from Spanish by Jeff Diedemann. And if you haven't heard me talk about this book previously, it's about a guy. So the author, Pablo Martin Sanchez, is a writer. And I don't know, he explains it in the introduction or the forward or whatever it's called. And he basically is like, yeah, I just like Googled my name one day, just to like see what would come up. And then he ends up finding out that right around the beginning of the 20th century, there was an anarchist who had the same exact name as him. So he goes down this rabbit hole trying to find out more details about this guy's life. And this is essentially a fictional retelling of the Pablo Martin Sanchez, the anarchist life. But again, heavily based in truth. So kind of like a few books I've talked about today, the Joan Orpi book, and the Franz Werfel book, and this kind of blend fact and fiction. As I've said before in the show, really love this. However, right around like the 450-ish page mark, if I remember correctly, it kind of slowed down. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if this is going to like hang on to the end. And then the very end absolutely split my wig. So
nice.
Definitely check
Love
it out.
when a book does that.
Yeah. Yep. So cool book. And this is more modern as well. I think it was originally published in 2018. So it's a pretty modern work. I believe Pablo Martin Sanchez is still writing. And this is also a deep vellum publication. Mike from our book club lives right near the deep vellum store.
That's cool.
So it was originally published in 2012 and the translation was 2018.
Nice.
So, okay. Is there anything else you want the people to know about you, Andy, and your opinions?
That's probably a whole episode worth of bullshit opinions I could fill. I don't think we need to get into that now.
All right. So for our Patreon members, head over to Patreon and you will see the continuation of this discussion where we're going to talk about 3 European books that we each want to read. If you enjoy the podcast, the best way to support us for free is by just sharing this with other readers. And if you want to step it up a notch, you can join the Patreon book club. It's only $5 a month. We post additional episodes, articles, full-length book reviews that I don't post anywhere else. We have the Discord server, which has been bananas. Kind of a random benefit to the Discord that I found personally is because there's so much going on in there.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. I've found myself like doom scrolling broad social media less.
Yeah.
Which I think is a win.
Yeah.
So I haven't been on like Instagram as much. I haven't been on TikTok as much. Not that I was super into those anyway. I try to use them in a somewhat professional sense, but it's just been like, I would say good for my mental health to like go somewhere where there's like a lot of activity around books with cool people rather than just like the BS that your algorithm's going to feed you.
Right. I know. I opened it up the other day at work and I realized there were like several weeks worth of just a single thread of people discussing plans to read JR.
Yes.
And I was like, this is great. This is awesome.
It's funny because I was telling Mike and Buddy from the book club that I was going to troll you because I was not anticipating you seeing that before today.
Yeah.
And then so when we were going to do the reading update, I was going to be like, and I started JR, and you're going to be like, what? And I was going to be like, yeah, dick, if you had gone into the Discord. Because this podcast is Andy and I's podcast. It's not my podcast, it's our podcast. And so a lot of people join maybe because they like you as a person. I'm not saying that they dislike me, but
Right.
maybe they connect with you more. And so a lot of times people will join and we have an introductions thread and they'll be like, oh, I saw Andy talking about this book. And I'm like, yeah, well, he ain't f***ing ears. But Andy's, he's living a real life. He has a real job. He does things that don't exist on the internet, like jujitsu, and goes to the gym. I don't do any of that shit. So, yeah. Okay. See you next time.
Bye-bye.